4 years ago, I was speaking with a girl named Sarah. Sarah said to me, "Chris, I have Asperger's syndrome. I guess having Asperger's means that there's things I can't do." I believe we need to rethink the autism spectrum. I educate children on their rights, and that sees me work with children, their teachers and parents, and I've delivered workshops in about 140 schools. I see how autism is a spectrum of behaviours. On one hand, it can cause children to experience social difficulties, anxiety, obsessive traits and disruptive habits. But on the other hand, it provides children with incredible gifts in memory, focus, detail and visual perception. No two children experience this spectrum in the same way. I meet children who might be non-verbal, children who are genius innovators and in a galaxy all on their own, or children like Sarah who have a mild form of autism, commonly referred to as Asperger's syndrome. So when Sarah says to me, having Asperger's means there's things I can't do, I thought, hang on. We don't have this label for children to say, I can't. We have it for children to say, I can. And what led me to that rethink was an earlier meeting I had with a mum named Lisa. Lisa had been talking to me about her disruptive child. Imagine if, simply because your child doesn't know how to socialise with other children, the world outcast your son or daughter as the weird one. People start to whisper about you as a parent. You're called the bad parent. People start to ban you from children's play dates because your child is just too hard work. Enough eyebrows get raised about your child that you're referred to child psychiatrists, where your child is placed in the fishbowl for 7 months, as all the experts stare at the strange ways that he or she moves. That was Lisa's life. She told me how the experts called her up and invited her to a meeting where they sat her down and said this: "Lisa, we're sorry to say, but everything that you find fascinating about your child is actually a problem. Everything that you thought you were doing right about your parenting, you're actually doing wrong. Your child has high-functioning autism. That means your child can function, but there's lots of things your child can't do. Your child will be withdrawn, socially inept, obsessive and have anxiety. It's highly likely that your child will get worse, so we recommend that you involve this service in your life constantly." I believe we need a rethink because Lisa is my mother. And I am that child on the autism spectrum. I am living and breathing her rethink. What my mum did for me when I was growing up was she wielded this quiet magic around me. She worked in the background to set up a network of people, of just family and friends, that always helped me say I can when I found myself facing an insurmountable challenge. They were the people that always worked on my gifts and helped me control my difficulties. Now, she used my label, high-functioning autism, to alert my primary and secondary teachers of the type of learning environment that would most enable me. And with me, every film she made me watch, every book she made me read, had this I can ethos to it. My childhood was full of stories of children that had overcome adversity. Now, this was no dream for Mum. I certainly was no picnic. I asked her recently, just how bad did this get? That's a very dangerous question to ask your mum. And she said, well, Chris, there was your finger painting. And I thought, what was so different about my finger painting? And she said, well, Chris, you did finger painting with your own feces. And I thought, whoa, I had that reaction. I was like, how did you survive me? Because the thing that she never let me do was she never let me opt out of things. I never wanted to be social as a child, and she just refused to let me use autism as an excuse. And so I would pay it out on her by throwing these tantrums. And they weren't just your typical child tantrums, it would involve the whole household. One of them was so bad that simply to avoid from throwing me through the window, she picked up my school bag and threw it across my bedroom, and it managed to go through my bedroom wall. And I shut up after that one. Now, when my family reached their exhaustion threshold, I would be sent to the refuge of my grandparents. And my grandparents had this wonderful impact on me. My grandmother researched exercises that would help me with my anxiety. And look, I still use those exercises today. My grandfather knew that I would have a panic attack at the thought of playing social sports like football and cricket with other children. And so he worked on my motor skills. He taught me sports in private. And even though he was permanently in a wheelchair, he used his mind and his humour to enable me to feel confident in my own skin. At school, it would have been safe to call me 9 going on 90. My brother Stephen, he read Aladdin, and I read encyclopedias. I had this fascination with plotting the different royal families of Europe, and I managed to do it from the 14th to 19th century. And I had distilled it down into this incredibly visual and detailed chart. And so when my grade 2 teacher, Miss T, set an assignment, I marched this chart up to her because I just felt I have found a new way of seeing the last millennium. No wonder we have so many revolutions and conflicts. These families are way too connected, small community, completely out of touch. And so when I took it up to Miss T, she said, oh goodness, Chris, doesn't this chart look interesting? But darling, our assignment is on winter. Would you mind drawing what winter looks like? And I thought, I've just done a PhD on the whole last millennium, and you want me to draw clouds and rain. That happened a lot to me at 9. I would also tell stories about family trees that were broken. And so when I was 10 years old and I was watching the midday movie at my grandparents' house, the film Gone with the Wind came on. And I couldn't cope with the fact that the daughter of the two main characters, Bonnie, had died in that horrible horse riding accident. And I thought, what do you mean the family tree's come to an end? There's no sequel? At 10, I'm going to have to continue that work. And so I actually published a sequel to Gone with the Wind. I even threw in a sex scene because that's what my autism and visual perception could do with sex ed. Raising me was also entertaining. Now, I was very lucky at school to have the advantage of making some great loyal friends. At primary school, my friend Erin could tell that my brain just absorbed every minor detail in class. And so she would help me to focus on classwork because I often wouldn't get good marks because I'd trail off into minor things. She helped me to focus. When I was a teenager, it was my friend Tim that helped me to pick up social cues so that I was less vulnerable to bullying. Because unfortunately, in Australia, 80% of secondary students with Asperger's syndrome are targeted in schoolyard bullying. When school was over and I lost the safety net of my routine, because people on the spectrum love their routine, my friend Alana helped me to focus on getting uni right, on dealing with my anxiety, and looking at campaigning, volunteering, and children's advocacy as a new focus for me. And of my teachers, it was an extraordinary woman named Christine Horvath who met me at 13 and could immediately tell that I just had this different mind, that I moved differently, and that I had a way with words and memory and creativity. And so what she did was she set up platforms for me to tell stories. And I moved from the kid that no one really knew how to take to the respected storyteller in the schoolyard. And I've just been following that pathway ever since. And so when I think about this network that my mum started, I know what she saw when those experts sat her down. When they said that I couldn't do things, she just chose to say, but he can. When they said I would struggle, she chose to think of strengths. When they said that this would be ugly, she chose to see that this could also be beautiful. And there's another way of putting her rethink. My friend and I agree that men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and autistic people are from Pluto. If we go to this next slide, my brother on the left, Stephen, the boy's boy, he's definitely from Mars. My sister Marion in the middle, she's from Venus. And the boy on the right, with his socks pulled up, with his shirt tucked in, his top button done up, and a comb over without one hair out of place, he's from Pluto. I look at it now and I'm like, I was just ahead of my time. I'm basically donning the 8-year-old hipster. I basically paved the way. But if we actually entertain this thought for a second, Pluto in our solar system has this fundamentally unique orbit. It moves in a different way. And it's the same for children on the autism spectrum. Our orbit, or our mind, just moves differently. That doesn't mean there's things we can't do. Hell, we can do most things, and we can even throw in a little extra. Our mind can move like lightning on certain subjects. Language, spelling, and words were what did it for me. But our mind, our orbit, can sometimes take longer to adapt in the area of social skills, but it does adapt. I can't tell you how confusing my literal mind found sarcasm as a kid. Let's just say you could take a joke a long way. And so I realised that when Sarah said to me, I guess having Asperger's means that there's things I can't do, that she's in an environment where people stare at her different orbit and point at it as a deficit. Whereas I came from an environment where my brave mother removed my disorder by creating an environment free of the stigma that would inhibit me. 20 years has passed since I was diagnosed. Experts no longer talk to parents like that. Health innovations have come a long way. But in my work, I see this stigma holding kids back all the time. And it's going to require all of us to do something about it. Because we're all going to work with people on this spectrum. 1 in 88 children in the United States are diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. And these children can bring extraordinary value to your life. Here is Leonardo da Vinci. Author Michael Gelb has researched da Vinci's life, looked at the way he gathered notes, his visual perception, his detail and focus, and concluded that this man was far advanced on the autism spectrum.